Everybody, it's Gil here with Sailing Vessel Dream Chaser, and in last week's episode, we went ahead and visited the USS Constitution, and we showed you how we removed the butterfly hatch. This week, I'll show you a little bit of progress that's being made on the solid handrails and lifelines. What you'll notice here is Nick has gone ahead and welded some loops on the base of each of the stanchion bases. Now, these are going to mount vertically on the actual gunnel instead of down through the deck. Didn't want to drill more holes in the deck after this gets done. But we have snatch blocks and sun awnings that we want to be able to tie down to it. And the stanchion bases didn't have a place to tie those. So what Nick did was took a rod that I think is 3/8 of an inch thick, if I recall, and essentially made a loop from one side to the other, giving me 2 snatch block locations at every stanchion base. That's going to give us, let's see, 32 tie-down locations on the boat for whatever we might need, fenders, etc., etc. So I think that's going to be a great fit. He also went ahead and finished up the posts themselves, the actual stanchion posts. 36 inches tall. He drilled a hole through each one, mounted a solid tube, a stainless steel tube through it, welded it on the outer edges, and then polished that all up and even beveled the edge. So when the cable lifelines go through the openings on the first and second strand, it's going to be solid at the top. We won't have any problem with that rubbing or chafing or tearing up or scratching from the stainless steel cable. So I think it's going to look great. If you're new to our channel, my wife and I do videos every single week about our lifestyle, living aboard and refitting our classic sailboat. If you think you'd enjoy that type of content, do us a favor, click subscribe and share it with your friends. Thanks.
So Monday morning rolled around, and it's kind of interesting. What I see is about 6 in the morning, you see the owner of the boatyard and the whole crew kind of get on the boat. They do an assessment, they have a little bit of a discussion, and they kind of talk about the work still to be done. The discussion today was, we need to go ahead and sand this down, use a straight edge here, and sand it to the curve of the roof. So you can kind of see one of the guys walking around with this white piece of poly board, essentially, and that's what he's using to get the shape to match the rest of the boat. He kind of bends it in shape and slides it up and down over the patched areas to ensure that it stays the same. But what you might have noticed here is he has the sander and he's kind of sanding all of this down where the glass was on it, and doing a good job of getting it fairly smooth. The interesting thing is, he'd sand for a little while, take a fan, kind of blow some of the dust off of it, wipe it with acetone, sand again, and he kind of repeated this process for the better part of the entire morning. Obviously I have this in fast motion and skipping it around a little bit. You can see every once in a while somebody comes over and sort of inspects the work a little bit, and now it's time to start adding some more layers of glass. So they already have about 4 layers down, and now after sanding and fairing that smooth, it's time to put a thinner chop strand mat down on it. So you can see the white look there where he just blew it off. That was the material put down in that particular place and cleaned up, and then he's doing the same in the other locations as well. Yeah, all in all, I'm real pleased with the way this looks. I'm impressed with the cleanup and the work they do. It's kind of interesting. They have this concept here of you can't see everything that you need to adjust until you put a primer down on it. So what you'll notice is in a couple of the scenes, as it was going through fast motion, both on this day, on Monday, as well as in some of the future days, you'll see that those areas might look white if it's the glass just being laid down. It may be brown if you're seeing the wetted out material, or it could also be red, which is essentially the fairing compound, or even gray, which is the epoxy primer they put over it so they can see any imperfections that are in it. So we're kind of on the next day here. It's early in the morning again, and the guys come back out. They're sort of inspecting their work now that it's all dried, feeling how smooth it is, and then they're also going ahead and resanding again. So you see him again finding his spots that are a little bit high and may need to have a little bit of work done on them. Again, just making sure that the surface is exactly what they ultimately want to see on it. So I'm glad to see their diligence. So early the next morning, you kind of see as the sun comes up, the owner of the yard comes back by again. That's Michael Meyer. I've talked about the boatyard several times. A great guy, great place to have work done. But he comes on, he inspects it, points out a little bit of more work that they need to ultimately do, and then the team starts doing the work on it. One of the guys that was doing the work here in the black shirt, I think he happened to notice the edges of the coach house roof still appear to be just a little bit soft, and you can kind of see Michael getting Lionel, the guy squatting down over there, who's their fiberglass and paint expert, kind of saying, all right, what's the best way to handle this? And they had a long discussion and debate about the best way to ultimately handle it, and you know, they direct everybody and they get working on it again, so it's kind of nice to see.
So as we can see here, we've got some progress that's been made. The additional layers have been added to the rooftop here, and it looks like it has a layer of epoxy primer on it. But yeah, this looks really nice. Let's see if I can get one that doesn't have a shadow on it so you can see it a little bit better. But these feel really smooth, blends in very nice. I like it. A little bit of fairing to be done, but not much. And then we can see in the big section right over here. This is the one that comes all the way over here along the side rail. Goes all the way down it, so that looks good. So it looks like there's some tape lines here along the edge of the coach house, and I suspect what's going on here is that tape was put down just to mark an area where they needed to start to sand and grind this. As you can see, there's some spots where the fairing compound is exposed, and it looks good all the way up to the front here. A couple of other minor changes here. It looks like the top of the chain plates have been bolted through. That looks good. Let's see, on both sides, I believe. Yeah, and we got them over here too, so that's good. And my other hose pipe up here has been mounted. We've got them on both sides here. Very good. We also have all the wedges for the stanchion bases. Every single one of these was at a different angle, and every one of them is marked, so they'll be ready to mount the actual stanchion bases. So it's the moment of truth. It's been 4 or 5 days since I've been down on the boat. I think it rained. I'm losing track of it a little bit. I'm going to go on up front to the V-berth and see if there's any water in the drip bucket that I put down there underneath that doghouse companion rails that we rebedded. We'll see how well that works now. Let's take a look. Yep, just heard my air conditioner kick off. I think I'm not getting water circulation on the forward air conditioner. I'm going to have to work on that. Come on up in here. See what we've got. Dry as a bone, which is a good thing. Let me take you with me as we kind of emerge from out of here. Difference here is pretty amazing. Just how clean everything looks up here. I like it. Toughest part is going to be us making sure that we don't crap it up. Yeah, love the big wide open deck. Yeah, I certainly still like a lot of what I see here. This looks good. Get the teak trim around the top, look real nice.
And all of that leads up to something fairly interesting. So this is the following day. We're talking about Thursday now. It's been the better part of the week, and the guys are doing a lot of inspection, kind of seeing what the best route is here to finish up the rest of the work. And they make a lot of good progress today. They go ahead and seal and shape the edge between the coach house roof and the actual coach house walls. And you know, I almost didn't notice it on the footage when I was looking at this afterwards. It wasn't until I got down to the boat that I actually noticed it. But if you look here in the footage, you'll see a couple of things. One, you see Steven going down below a couple times. What he's actually looking for is the Mizzen mast step. But if you notice, they're sweeping the whole boat down real well. They're hosing it off. They're letting it dry. They got some fans out there. And as this is fast forwarding a full day over a 60-second period, the very last thing you'll notice is they just primed all of the decks. So kind of cool to see that kind of progress all in one day. It's amazing when they're ready to do it, how fast it goes.
My wife and I do videos every single week about our lifestyle, living aboard and refitting a classic sailboat. If you find that kind of content interesting, please do us a favor. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Share it with others you think might enjoy it as well. Give it a thumbs up. That always helps. Let's get back to the video.
Friday afternoon, I decided to give a shot on sanding the bottom of the Mizzen step. And what I quickly realized is that the stuff that's on here is really, really tough. So I got to come up with a better plan here pretty quick. As you know from our channel, I buy 99% of all the stuff we need off Amazon. Every once in a while, I get a little behind and I don't keep track, and I didn't order it in time. So here I am, getting gloves and sandpaper. I have plenty of sandpaper actually. I just needed something really heavy duty. I've got some old adhesive on this Mizzen mast step, and I just want to get the stuff off. So I'm dropping down to 60 or 80 grit. And I ran out of gloves. If I'm doing epoxy work, I want gloves. I hate trying to pick epoxy out of my knuckles. I'm gonna grab that. I'm gonna grab some heavy duty grit sandpaper too. 80 grit ought to do it.
Good Saturday morning, everybody. So over at the boat today, a couple things I want to do. I decided to run over to the store and pick up some more sandpaper. I'm going to try and get the rest of that mizzen step sanded. Also picked up the frame from the forward cabin top roof hatch. I need to do a little bit of repair on it. I want to sand it, and there's a small section that was cracked where the hinge was connected. I think I'm going to try and epoxy that and see if I can fix it that way. I'll end up rebuilding a new one of these down the road somewhere. So the first thing I noticed today when I came up to the boat is a tarp over the top of it. It was definitely raining pretty hard down here yesterday. As a matter of fact, they had some damage at a local festival from the wind on the front of that storm. I suspect they put this here mainly because of the companionway hatch that has a temporary slide on it. But I see something else that's changed quite a bit too. I'll take a look here. So you might see the deck has been primed. That's pretty cool. And then over here, see, maybe you can see this. I'm going to try and step up on it and look back. You can kind of see it right here. The edge of the coach house roof, or coach house itself, has all been sanded again. So I suspect they're getting ready to come back here with final coats of paint over that, and they'll do the roof as well. You can also see this has all been faired and smoothed again, so and sanded. Getting ready for that paint. See if you can see this. There's marks here where somebody came by and circled all the spots that still need a little bit more touch-up. So it's cool that they're really paying close attention to all of it as they go. It's time we see if we have any leaks in here after that rain last night. I'm having a hard time seeing into the bin, but I'll climb down there in a minute and look. We definitely still need to come down here and do some repair around the edge of the hatch there before that gets glassed. You may remember this mizzen step from one of the previous videos. This is what goes underneath the aluminum base that the mizzen step sits on. I'll put a link right up here to that video. That thing was a son of a gun to get off, and a lot of it is because of the adhesive that was on here. I started to do this. I'll show you what I'm doing. This actually peeled up some of the fiberglass in this section. That's what you see here is the white. I've got almost all the way through that. I'm down to the 4200. There's some more black sealant below it. Now I'm just going to get some 80 grit on an air sander. It's one of the nice things about when I work over here at the yard. They have a big compressor I can connect an air tool to. Sand's probably 5 times faster than electric, so we'll give it a shot. And away we go. I lied. I guess I need to turn the compressor on. It helps. These work a lot better if the compressor's on. I should probably wait for it to get up to speed, but it's a big one. Yeah. You can see it needs to catch up. So while I'm waiting on the compressor to catch up, I'll show you what I need to do on this. You can see here the hinges for the hatch, and this one right here had cracked. So I'm going to pull this off of here, get a screwdriver so I can fix that piece. Now we're just going to take this off here. I'll keep this with the hatch so it doesn't get lost.
So it was now time to start sanding the mizzen step again, and I gotta tell you, it was really tough to get this stuff off of there. There was a layer of fiberglass that was stuck to it. There were a layer of adhesive that was some kind of a white adhesive. There was a black adhesive below that. And what I've essentially done was taken about an hour and a half of sanding and put it down into about 15 seconds here. It was really tough to get off, but you can see the final product is looking pretty good.
Off, it's time to essentially repeat the entire process. I'm going to start on this bottom because I want to get a good seating here for bedding it. As you can see, Sanding this thing takes a while. I won't bother you guys with taking you through all of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the bottom side of that hatch frame. I'm going to sand all the adhesive that was on it before, whatever it was bedded with in the past. I'm going to sand all that off. I'm also going to sand all the finish off all the other sides so it can be refinished. I'd like to make a new one of these, but honestly, my wood shop is such a mess right now. It would take me the better part of a day just to clear it out enough for me to get the tools out and be able to do work. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and patch that small section that you saw where the hinge had cracked it. It wouldn't surprise me if down the road there's a video on how to make a new hatch frame, because I just don't feel like this is going to last forever, this hinge job with the epoxy. But we'll give it a shot and see. It is a viable repair for a lot of different areas. The only reason I don't think this is going to work is if I leave the hinges where they are. So in other words, put the hinge on the new piece of epoxy. The epoxy is going to be plenty strong. But over time, if this continues to open up and put pressure on that wood spot, potentially it cause an issue. What I really need to do is get a set of brackets that prevent the hatch from opening any further than a certain point. That's actually what caused this. We would prop this thing up with a piece of wood, and a couple of times the wind would blow and push it over the rest of the way. That's ultimately what ended up putting the pressure on it and cracking it. And I can tell this had happened before because the opposite side of the frame, so in other words, if the hatch opens this way, it used to open that way, on the opposite side of the frame is an epoxy repair. So it's been done a few times already. All right, I've been sanding away for about the last hour and a half. I went ahead and got that Mizzen base sanded, and also the hatch frame as well. Let me show you what those look like here. So you can kind of see them right here. And just to give you an idea, you can see with the Mizzen base, it's sanded real well. I didn't bother going all the way down to like 220 on this. I just went 80 right now. Same with the frame. Most importantly, I wanted to get this bottom side cleaned and ready to go so that I could bed it back on there. And I've kind of cleaned this up. I'm not doing the final here, because what I'm going to end up doing, you can see this section. You picked it up. You can kind of see where this is split right here. This is where the hinge was, and at one point that lid raised up too high and it split the wood right there. Looking down on it, you may be able to really see it in the shadow here, but you can really see it right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp this up, and I'm going to pour epoxy in there and let it lay flattened. That should give me a good patch. Let's get that going. I think I've shown some of this before. This is actually a bunch of the parts from my fuel system right there. And I noticed this week they were down below doing some work, and there is the main filter for my fuel polishing system. I still have the dual ray quartz filter boss down below for the actual engines. Now they pulled that out of there. I don't know if they're going to put it back in there, or if we're going to eliminate that and just rely on the filter boss for essentially polishing. Given that a diesel engine tends to only burn about 25 to 30% of the fuel that goes through it, it's constantly essentially polishing 65 to 75% of the fuel, putting it back into the tank that it was drawn from. So you end up with a bit of a polishing system anytime the engine's running. The question really becomes if you want to polish from one tank to the other, or if you get some bad fuel and you try to separate any water. I may put it back in there as a secondary or an optional thing. I'm not sure yet. It's always difficult showing small epoxy work, mainly just because you mix up a small batch, it pots fairly quick. I'm working in a small area, it's tough to hold the camera, and I don't want to get epoxy on it and whatnot. So let me show you what I've done. I went ahead and did the repair on this hatch. It's still wet, but I want to show you how I set it up, and I'll kind of talk through it while showing it and see if that helps a little bit. All right, so as we come over here to the hatch, what you'll see is I went ahead and I took tape with this kind of plastic, and I essentially put rows of tape over this plastic just to make it more rigid. And then I cut a square of that, a rectangle. And that rectangle is what's going to be right up against the epoxy, because this will peel off real easily from it and leave me a nice smooth edge. The idea is to reduce the amount of sanding that I have to do. So what I then did was I put layers of tape to hold that in place, and then I just used 3 mixing sticks that I use for epoxy, and it worked fairly well. All it's doing is making this a little bit rigid, and I clamped those to this. So you kind of aim down here so you can see this. I'm going to turn on the flash, see if it helps. I think this kind of helps. So what you're looking at here is I just propped a bunch of stuff into this hole to keep the epoxy from running down in there, and you can see the blue tape. So you see the popsicle sticks, and then there's blue tape right in there, and then there's the flooded epoxy, and then there's the base with the height that I ultimately wanted it to be in. I'm going to show this from the side now as well, so you can kind of see by setting it at this angle. Let me put my hand back here just to shade that. by setting it at this angle right in here, it goes ahead and gives me a nice flat surface. All right, let's take this off and take a look. All right, there we go. Looks pretty good. I'll just take a sander and sand that smooth. We'll be all set. Yeah, good and solid. I gotta tell you, I'm out of water down on the boat, and I am parched. I'm going to get a bottle of water to drink right now. I got here at 9:30 or so. It's, I think, 4 o'clock. So at 4 o'clock, I haven't had water. I haven't had water all day, which I shouldn't do on a regular basis, and I'm out of water on the fridge down in the boat, so I got to get a case of water too. We hope you enjoyed this week's video. We made a little bit of progress this week, right? We went ahead and repaired that hatch frame. We needed to do the epoxy repair where it was cracked. Next week, if we have some time, we're also going to do some repairs on a wooden slide rail for the companionway. We have some epoxy work to do on that as well. And I may actually go ahead and take a look at my wooden mast. I think I'm going to do some exploratory holes in it and see if it's solid construction or if it's boxwood. We do believe it's teak or some kind of hardwood, so it would be wonderful if it was actually solid, but heck, even if it's hollow, I think we'll be able to use that wood and repurpose it for a lot of cool things to sort of pay a little honor to the boat itself since we've replaced that wooden mast. If you enjoyed this week's video, please do us a favor. Go ahead and like it, subscribe, hit that little bell notification so you get updated on any new content, and then go ahead and leave a comment down below. We really like the engagement in the community it builds. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.